Hi, everyone. So excited to be here, especially with my good friend and colleague, Karl Dakin. We really talk financial, mostly funding. And because of that, today's word of the day is business strategy. We really do depend on comments and insights that you can share with us to make us as relevant and also to educate us to things that we should know about. With that said, want to turn it over to Karl, and Karl can share a little bit about his background and what his initial thoughts on business strategy. So, Karl, take it away.
I appreciate being a guest here on the show this morning, Monday morning, bright and early. And uh, I basically work with businesses and communities to assist them in raising funding. And as a coach, I help design the plays, I tell them how to do it, and then I cross my fingers that they execute better than some of my favorite football teams did over the weekend. Um, but business strategy is the topic of today. I am working to build my LinkedIn top voice on strategy. That was a strategic move that occurred over the weekend from another topic that wasn't gaining much attention. But I'm involved in so many different things that generally when people look at me, they think I have no strategy, but I do. It's just a combination of long and short term goals with the intent that they're in alignment so that every time I do something in the short term, it builds towards the long term. And it's something that I think most small businesses do not do, which is have good, well defined long term goals. And so their short term accomplishments kind of look reactive. They look like they're meandering or they're kind of wandering. And I think it's because they don't have a good defined outcome that they need to achieve.
Yeah, that puts it in great perspective. And starting out, looks like we've got comments. So that was a real interest that we wanted to see how fast and how many. Terrence is here. Terrence is a great gentleman. I've known for about 3, 4 years on LinkedIn, done some fabulous things. Welcome, Terrence. We've got Carrie here coming through YouTube. I think what I've done is I put the link of the broadcast so everybody can join at their own leisure, at their own time. They don't have to wait till the beginning, and there is no more that I can tell broadcast that you can see in someone's LinkedIn profile background. And I've known I've had that issue with Karl, with Harvey, with everybody and I couldn't figure it out until I had to look further. And I think business strategy, well, let me share Carrie. There was a teddy bear eating at a nice buffet. He said he couldn't eat any more food since he's stuffed. Well, that aligns. And getting back to my thought with curiosity and with business strategy, it's all about, in most cases, the future, is what you intend to do with your strategy, how you intend to do it, what your results are intended to be. And it depends on curiosity. It depends on, oh, seeing or appreciating questions before they're answered and answer them for yourself, even. And I think that's really the key. When something doesn't look like it should, it's room for investigation, room for questioning, and room for collaboration. What do you do when you come to an impasse? Or you come up with a great business idea, but the strategy doesn't fit. When you start putting reality to the paper, there's a void or an opening. And that's where really, really strong individuals start to fill that gap for themselves at least, because you got to get ready before you prepare or present to someone else. And I think that has a lot to do with it. So you've been involved in so many different situations with so many different individuals. What is the common thread that is important when you're developing a strategy?
Right. I actually sat down with a good friend of mine for many decades on Friday where he had a new business idea and he wanted to get my feedback on funding of the idea. And so my first question is, where's your revenue coming from? And we hit a wall in the first question. But to receive investment, you need to have revenue. And then the revenue needs to be big enough, large enough to pay the investor back and give them a little extra to recognize they're putting their money under your care and control. And so kind of going all the way back to the movie where they said, follow the money. It's really important that in your long-term strategy, your goal is to accomplish something. And that means that you have to build towards over time. You're going to have to put resources to work. Typically, you don't have enough resources to do everything you want to do. So you've got to get an investor involved. And it's just like one more part to your strategy, but you still have to get back to where's the money. You can have a great idea, but if nobody pays for it, or if they won't pay enough to cover your cost, you have an idea, but you don't have a legitimate business. And in some cases, the people have great ideas, but they can't manage their ideas, so they need to bring in other people to help them, which means more money, more funding. And then the revenue's got to be greater to handle the total cost of everything you're doing. So I default inherently to funding issues and where's the money at to pay for everything. And if I can see how all the pieces fit together, then it's a matter of putting that on paper, sharing it within the team, refining that, and then acting to realize the opportunity that's presented. And so my strategy is dependent upon having enough resources to do whatever I want to do. And if I don't have them in my back pocket, I'm going to get some help.
Yeah, that's excellent. Very good. And what brings to mind is really what are your expectations that you're presenting in your business strategy? So how do you manage those? Some people, they think, well, they don't understand reality makes a difference. And most people start out minimizing something just because it's somebody else's, right? Someone prepares something just like an offer. You'll review it and usually come back with something, which may be why this or why that. Too many people are afraid to trust other people's intelligence. And in a sense, it's like, not only what are you using the money for, but why and how does the money come back? Too many people say, well, we'll be profitable from day one and cash flow. That's the case. You probably don't need money because on day one, you're already making money. And why wouldn't you keep making money until you found a situation where you needed money? Other people will string something out forever. Like you'll just keep put money in, and magically in 2 years, it'll start coming back to you in greater quantities. That has, again, it depends. Is this a big capital investment? I mean, you got to put a foundation into the building before you can charge rent. And that's realistic. But, you're looking for partners as well as just money. And that's what you'll get. And, your first impression is important. But also your first result is important. So if you said in 90 days, here's the numbers you're going to see, they're not there. It makes those numbers become more concerning, but it also builds less confidence in future numbers. And you don't want to be on the edge with whatever you're doing, right? You want to leave a little room for error. You want to have some contingency situations that you can build into it that, this is based on this, but here's what could affect it. So if it does, it's like it was already understood and presented to people. And, I guess treating people with the respect and courtesy that you would expect. And again, it's who you're dealing with. In most cases, if you're looking for money, the people you're looking for money for have more experience in providing that money than you do in raising that money. Well, I'm saying it depends if you're talking institutional investors, if you're talking of experienced investors, if someone spent their career 30 years doing this, they've been around the block a few times. And those are opportunities everybody has. So, the opportunity begins in a lot of cases with the plan and the strategy behind it and the support behind it, and also your experience in doing it. If you've done 10 deals and been successful with the same type of deals as you're presenting now, your credibility has already been enhanced. And based on who you did it with, if you have references, and that's really, you're talking with people who are just new to what you're doing or presenting, and you've been probably thinking about it for years and making plans. So you got to give people the benefit of the doubt to catch up with you. So where do you see the biggest red flag for most people when they create their business strategy, Karl?
Yeah, this comment is for Harvey Tuck, who's in the coffee franchising business. But um, people tend to think that they have to buy everything up front. And so if you're going to open a coffee shop, you're thinking, okay, I need a little bit of place to make the coffee, a cash register, and I need some chairs if I'm going to let people sit in the coffee shop and this isn't a drive-through. But a rookie entrepreneur will often go like, well, I should buy everything. I want brand new coffee making equipment. I want a brand new cash register. I want brand new chairs and so forth. Even though there's dozens of restaurants closing their doors and they can pick these up in great condition at a fraction of the cost. But I've seen entrepreneurs go further and they're going, well, I need to own the building, and so they're going, well, we're going to open a coffee shop and 95% of the money is going to buy a building to put the coffee shop in. And then you'll have an entrepreneur, and this sounds extreme, but they'll go, well, maybe an existing store isn't going to convey the image I want. So I need to build a brand new building with a very unique motif. And we'll go through the construction process, which adds another 1.5 to 2 years to the cycle before they can even open the door and start selling coffee and start making revenue. And or another alternative to this story is the guy says, I've got a brand new coffee bean roaster and I'm going to open a coffee shop. And you're like, do you know anything about selling coffee? Do you know anything about servicing the public? You may be the greatest coffee bean roaster inventor in the world, but that doesn't make it a business. That doesn't mean that you understand any of the other elements. So classically, the big mistake is they try to do more than they need to get to their first dollar revenue. So if you make that path, that critical path in your strategy as short as possible to demonstrate you can make revenue, then you can build on that over time. If you later want to buy some new equipment, fine. If you want to buy the building, great. We're all in favor of you building wealth by ownership in the building you're in. But that's not a day one issue. Your day one issue is getting to your first dollar of revenue. And with that, that demonstrates that you have a business and you have a potential to make a profit, which means you can attract investors into your deal. If you can't demonstrate a clear line of getting to that first dollar of revenue, it generally means you don't understand what you're doing, and maybe you need to recruit more people onto your team or get advisors to assist you to make that critical path look like a 4-lane highway with mode trimmed on the edges and all the lighting and markers and so forth, instead of looking like you need to hack your way through a jungle with a machete.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And what comes to mind is, how do you handle your personal life? And how much different is that than you're projecting your professional life? I mean, I've got a TV that's, a nice TV, but it's about 10 years old, but it just works just as well. I know a lot of people that start a business, and before you know it, they're spending umpteen dollars on office furniture, or every year or so they're changing out their PCs, even though the ones they had were good enough. And, Carl's right. I think there's a level of pragmatism and thriftiness because every dollar is important until you get it back. If you're starting to generate a lot of income, a lot of cash flow, well, then image is important, and having some pizzazz. And, at the same time, when you look at Apple starting in a garage, the last thing those two guys did was think about a building or an office. Why? Because they couldn't afford it and they didn't want to waste their opportunity on bringing someone in early just to do some cosmetic improvement or to build one's ego. Your image is best portrayed as a quality, profitable business. I've had more respect for people who are located in the back of a warehouse, if that's all they need is office space, than coming downtown and buying this $100 square foot space that no one's going to care about if your business doesn't do good. And Carl's absolutely right. You can always get that stuff later if it's important. But you may find out that a lot of businesses, Outback Steakhouse, they're not doing so well now. But the reason they were called Outback is not only because of the Australian theme, because they always took second and third tier properties because the rent was so low. And they hope to be a destination spot where people would go to them. It wouldn't be like driving down a main drag and seeing a Dairy Queen and having an impulse. But what fits your business? And some businesses are a little bit more glamorous. I'm sure if you're in the entertainment business and you're catering to rock stars and movie stars, you're going to have a little bit more pizzazz, or it's not going to be as enticing. But sometimes your image and your brand needs to develop with time. You can't just throw it out there and say, we're this and we're going to be more of that, and you haven't done anything. And you might have discounted or restricted yourself from different avenues because you already put your brand stamp on something first. And again, these are questions that one should leverage somebody like Karl so that, you get a quality experience perspective. And doesn't mean everything everybody says is something you take word for word, but it does give you a little bit time to step back. Maybe this has some relevance, or maybe I can move this a few degrees over. And once you start moving that, two things. First of all, you're making changes before you had to. You're leveraging someone else's experience that could be significant and greater than yours. And you're learning how to collaborate, because even your investors are going to require a certain level of interaction and collaboration. It could be reporting. It could be meetings. And you want to keep that excitement going with your investors, because hopefully they may be longer term investors, or they may be people who, once they put their toe in the water, may want to bring other people in. And I think that's an easier approach than going out and just finding people. So business strategy has a lot to do with business and with strategy. I guess when you combine it, you have business and the strategy of business. Play on words, maybe. So, Karl, how do people put a strategy together that they can be very comfortable with, and maybe not be so focused on valuation and how much, but who they're attracting?
I see that a strategy is one of the earlier stages in putting together a business, where I start off first with what I call an idea. And it sounds cool. And then I go, but let's test it. Let's put it into a model which says, let's do all the steps necessary to generate the first dollar of revenue, determine all the costs, all the resources required, and what kind of money is generated. Knowing that a single iteration or a single transaction probably will not be profitable. You have to do it in some scale. But I want to get really, really down to the basics, take the whole thing, make sure I understand all the parts before I start putting a whole bunch of stuff behind it. And then with that, seeing this thing, then I have to set my goals. And you mentioned personal and business goals. all too often we treat them as they're totally different, siloed, separate from each other. And if we do that, we're at risk that one or the other is going to dominate the other one to the point of extinction. So we'll come back to that topic in a moment, and I'll stay on your question. So then I set my goals, which is where I want to go, which should reflect both my personal and business objectives. And so this is an outcome that represents success to me as I see it, as I want it to be. This is my vision of where I want to go. The strategy then is the next step, which is how do I get from where I'm at today to my goal that I've just defined for myself? I shouldn't let the strategy dictate the goal. The strategy is to enable me getting from where I'm at to the goal in a reasonable fashion. I don't want miracles. I don't want to part the Red Sea in order to get to where I want to go. I want something to be pretty methodical, practical, realistic, and going forward. If I have a strategy and now I know my goal and how to go basically, steps along the path, then I build my plan, which is let's put this in a paint by number kit. Let's give it to my entire team. Let's bring in the resources I need to make this all happen. And then I can go out and recruit funding. But all too often, you'll see people start without a long-term goal. They actually don't have a strategy. They just believe or hope something's going to happen. They don't understand all the pieces of what they're doing, so they have gaps in how they go about doing their business. They don't know what they don't know, so they will fall into holes or gaps automatically because they're there. Just because they can't see them doesn't mean they don't exist. So we work through this very methodically, and strategy is at the front end of putting this together before we start the business, before we do the plan, and it's basically connecting two dots, today and tomorrow.
Well put. I really like what you had to say there, Karl. And I think also principles have a lot to do with it too, is, when you can get comfortable personally and professionally, and also align with what's important to you and what you believe has value to others. And at least you have, a compass to some extent to measure against. Will this take me further along my way to a positive outcome, or will this take me on a detour that is unknown? The other thing that comes to mind with strategy, if it was just you and you alone, you wouldn't need as much because maybe you could be a little more spontaneous and responsive. But ultimately, you're going to build a team, maybe a CFO, maybe salespeople. They're going to have to know what they're looking forward to and what the expectation of them, and everything you create as far as an incentive program has to align with reality, because to have a huge bonus plan that no one can achieve is not very motivating. Also, having a plan that's so easy and the bar so low is not going to stimulate a lot of innovation or energy. And with that, when we talk about energy, we can't stop talking about Harvey Tuck. Harvey Tuck has been here for over a year plus and has done amazing things, starting out where we were a year ago, not starting out where we are today. But the beauty of that is everybody was able to learn together as everybody else learned, and it continues to build. Harvey has the franchise show on Tuesday, has the franchise brand show on Thursday, does some unbelievable things. I'm so proud of Harvey and what he's doing. And the nice thing is we're learning together and we're ratcheting up together. So as soon as I learn something, I share it. Harvey learns something, he shares it. Because first of all, there's plenty of opportunity. One should never come from scarcity or defending small pieces of territory when you can join forces with other players and leaders and take advantage of their efforts and time in return for sharing what you have, and you've already paid for it. So it's really a dividend that's easy to share with others. So thank you, Harvey. Look forward to your show. Glad you made it on LinkedIn, because that was last week's concern, which meant this week's business strategy which it looks like was achieved. And, the disappointment you have and the frustration when something doesn't work like you're expecting it to or like it used to drives you for maybe a day or so to figure it out. And then all of a sudden you feel like a hero when you accomplish it because you went from found to lost to refound. And now you're in another good position, but you also know that within a few weeks or a month, it's going to happen again. It's like, how fast do you identify it? How fast do you deal with it? And then how fast do you overcome it? Harvey comes back with looking forward to the next Thursday group and sharing together. Looking forward to having you, Harvey. Last week, was a stellar meeting, and actually Kelly kind of won the day with her observation and review of Khan's website. Not everybody knows what we're talking about except for me and Harvey and Khan and Kelly, but that's okay because sometimes you can play to a smaller audience. And with an hour, you get to play a lot. So it's not like someone had to move over for someone to move in. It's an either and instead of an either or game. Looking forward, Harvey. I can't wait to share what's going on and hear what's going on with you and share it with the group. So thank you, Harvey. With that, looking at business strategy, in a different light, the key is also building a quality model you can be proud of. It's like an invention. Maybe you're the only one who knows what it is and how it works, but you're enamored by what you were able to accomplish. And it builds confidence because it's real, it works, and it's just a matter of time till the exposure is right. And I think that's a big part of business strategy is marketing and communication. You could have the best idea, but if no one hears about it or no one knows it, and Karl always makes the great point, is that a lot of people go after financing where it isn't there for anybody, right? They're going after people. I mean, if you take Irwin Jack, if he says 100 million to 5 billion as far as financing, having a $50,000 seed investment is going to have no relevance. It could have been the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's matching. And I think that's important with a strategy. Are you matching the people you're going to be talking to? Are they looking forward to this? Is this an inconvenience? Is this something that kind of skirts the edge of where they invest? If they're in e-tail, retail's not going to sell, no matter what you do. And if it does, it's going to come at a discounted price. So it's really fine. You don't go to a Ford dealership and ask them about the Chevy lineup this year. I mean, they may be able to find you one, but that's not you would be better off going to the Chevy place first. And then asking around, even if you don't know, go in a Ford dealership and say, do you sell Chevys? Versus, I don't care, you're a dealership, sell me something. And I think that also doesn't give you the reference of rejection. Sometimes you got to find out what's wrong to make it right. And the only time to find out wrong is to get rejected based on something. Because whoever reviewed it, whoever took a meeting with you, had obviously an interest because they kind of dove in with you. But that only goes as far as, hey, does this meet my requirements, criteria for the next quarter or year? And everybody is tasked with a mission, and there's companies and individuals who are on the lookout. If you look at sports, my son just got done with his whole scouting thing. And it's funny, in college, you have quiet periods where you can talk to people, but you can't do anything beyond it. And then once Labor Day's over, you got a whole meeting that says, here's our strategy tomorrow, and we're going to contact these 30, let's say, prospects, knowing that all these other schools are going to be contacting probably those 30 prospects, and just, realizing the nature of the game. So, looking ahead, Karl, I know you're involved with many different opportunities. Some are in the beginning stages, some are in the later stages. When does the rubber meet the road when somebody presents something to you to get to the point where you say, this is exciting to me? What turns you on?
That's a really good question because I've seen so much. I'm a little bit jaded, a little bit cynical, and I require more proof of life before I believe that we have a true opportunity. Um, if someone walks in the door and shows me they have a product or a service ready to go to market, it's not still in development. They're not, even at an earlier stage, which is trying to figure out what it is, how to make it work, all those kinds of things. That's a major milestone because it means that they understand at least what it is that they're trying to sell. If they match that with having talked to the marketplace to potential customers and they have feedback in enough quantity to verify that when they sell it, it will be accepted by the marketplace and sales should naturally occur, then that's another stake in the ground that's there. Then we look to the resources necessary to go to market. Somebody may have a great product, and I was talking with a guy a couple of weeks ago. He has a brand new invention, and he's recognized he can't do it. This is outside of um, his wheelhouse. He doesn't have the money to do it, and the self-reflection reality is that he needs to sell it or license his invention to someone else. But he's looking at how to go to market, all things that go along with it, and he's looking for help, which is a legitimate recognition of he knows who he is. Okay, he knows where he's starting from, where he's at today. He's not looking 3 years down the road and already spending his money on a new yacht that can only be bought with profits by gazillions of sales. He's dealing with today. And that gets to the management team where um, you have a group of people with all the skills necessary to do everything you need to go. And you mentioned a minute ago, sharing, communicating with your team. But I think one of the mistakes a lot of businesses make is that their team should be more than the people working under their roof. It should include every contractor, service provider, vendor, supplier, reseller, distributor, anyone in their supply chain, because each of them is also critical to the path of success. If you have to work through a distributor to sell and you have no distributor, you're not going anywhere. If you need this widget, which I'm trying to find a replacement part for, and I can't find it anywhere, I'm not going anywhere. So it's a matter of understanding where you fit in what I call the context of your market, within your business, within your industry, which gets into a lot of extra things like where do you fit into your community? How are you contributing or taking things out of your community? There's all these different things that you really need to understand. So when you move forward, you also understand how you are impacting, affecting other people. Are they going to help you along the path? Are they going to wave as you go by? Or they're going to stop you because somehow you're doing something that they don't like? Working through all these things requires a really, really good understanding of who you are, where you are, what you can do. And to the extent you don't know how to do something, you can't guarantee an outcome, then you need to get some help. Whether it's expert help, it's somebody else on your team, it's somebody in your supply chain. But think of everyone who will help make your company a success as part of a larger community. And you need to know who they are. You need to know what it takes to keep them on board in order to keep things going. And just too many times businesses plunge forward without preparation, without planning, without a strategy, and they hit a wall and they act surprised. And you're like, how can you be surprised? You didn't know where you're going. You didn't know how fast you were going. You didn't think about all the things you needed that you didn't bring with you. It's kind of like the story you read in the newspaper, the person who goes hiking in the mountains and 10 days later, hopefully they're found alive when they went off the path. And you're like, where have you been for 10 days? They go wandering around. I go, well, that reminds me of a lot of the businesses I know. they went off the path because they didn't have a path, and then they didn't have any tools with them to get back on the path, so they wandered.
Yeah, that's when I think of what you just said, it reminds me of relevancy, not only to yourself, but your team, and then how it extends beyond that team and how does it continue to hold its strength. Because usually something that's not that strong will dilute every layer it goes down or every person it touches. And when you want to get to the end user, your ultimate customer, does it get stronger when it gets to them as opposed to being diluted? The other aspect is, again, based on relevance, is who are you appealing to? If it's everybody, but nobody's really going to buy it versus a select group of buyers, which kind of brings me to that whole lowest hanging fruit, right? Most people say, well, just deal with the lowest hanging fruit because it's there. And because it's low hanging, it's easier to achieve. Some people just go out and say, well, we're going to do all fruit. And it isn't there yet, right? It's like throwing the ball out there and trying to get under it before you catch it. And sometimes there's no ball in your hands, and you can't use that fake it till you make it to any extent. There are some trial and error with marketing or with product development, but when you go to market, you've got to have your best foot forward. You've got to be excited, and you've got to be motivated to drive to the next level. And at what point is it fun? Because fun will overcome stress and hard work. If you're enjoying yourself, and that could be, I'm learning a lot, I'm getting around a lot of good people, I'm building something that one day is going to last and provide for a lot of people. Well, that's the thing that keeps you going, because you can only be a cheerleader for others if you're still a cheerleader for yourself and your business opportunity. So there's a lot to it, and you don't want to just be good at the gate and then stumble right out of the gate. You want to launch from the gate and really have something of momentum, something of appreciation, because eventually, especially in today's social media area or arena, you need social proof. Before it was like, here's what I said, and here's a local newspaper wrote an article about my business. Well, that's a little bit of social proof, but usually newspapers write articles about potential advertisers. So there's a little bit of inherent self bias. But when you have customers, suppliers, investors who are giving testimonials, especially on shows like this, doing small clips for you, why not let it out there? There's no sense covering something up that is virtuous and valuable. And it also puts you on a path of strategy to start thinking about that in advance. Who can confirm this? Who's a third party validator for this? Who's already doing this in Cincinnati and they're having phenomenal success? And what happens is there is a pack mentality. I remember one time about 30 years ago in Denver, like 6 different bagel chains opened up at exactly the same time. And they probably weren't in communication with each other. Some were in a block or two of each other, which meant that nobody could win because it was so congested and saturated, where it's really understanding what is happening other places. Because what's happened, especially in this country or in a certain region of this country, if it's working there and here's how it's working, that's a blueprint for you. I had a partner I always mentioned for about 12 years. This was a guy who was a professional note taker, always had a little cassette recorder, would start talking into it. And he would go everywhere where there was competition and see what their best practices, and he started writing down where they display this, little things, but it meant a big difference in the scheme of things. And why not look at what other people are doing? Some people feel like if I see it, I'm almost giving them credit. I used to buy all the people's products. Before I bought a truckload, I'd buy one. see if it worked, and then I'd source it if it made sense. So, there is something to copying, there's something to referring. The reason we're doing this is ABC Donut Place in Montreal is phenomenally successful, and this is what they're using, and we're going to take advantage of it, or we're going to go partners with them and share some intellectual property. There's a lot to it, and some people are too single focused, too superficial, that they just cover the surface. We're going to sell donuts because we're going to make the best ones, and they're going to taste so good, and because of that, everybody wants one of those, and it'll never end as far as our success. Well, it's a great story, but it's not a story that's sustainable or long term, because as much as you don't want to copy somebody, people will copy you. Right? So why not get in the game? And I think the other thing, and Harvey's done that really well, is look to other broadcasts and not compete with them, but reach out and invite them on your podcast. And all of a sudden, you're on their podcast and you're friends and you're working together. Versus so many people are doing negative things, bad mouthing other organizations, or we're better than them, and you don't have to be better than them, and you're wasting a lot of print, a lot of space, and you're showing yourself as being pretty small and petty, when the bigger game is the opportunity is yet to happen, and getting prepared for it, because people want to see an exit strategy as part of a business strategy. This may be your lifelong dream, and maybe you'll spend all your life doing it, but we're here for 3 years and we want a 30% return on our investment. And you got to show it to us if we're that type of investor, and because that's their business, is reinvesting money, making money for their shareholders. And if you're not cognizant of everybody's needs, you don't know their timing, right? If someone says, I got to leave the show in 30 minutes, well, we're going to make sure in 30 minutes that they had the last thing to say and they spent as much time, versus, oh, oops, you're leaving now, didn't have a chance to speak, but everybody knew about it. So knowledge is power, especially when it's leveraged and utilized. Jason's here. Thank you, Jason. Came in through LinkedIn. That's 2 extra points today. Good morning to all. Great way to start off your week, Jason. And Jason actually will be with Beverly tomorrow. That's a first time for both of them. Looking forward to it. Jason's with One Path Coaching, and Beverly is a world-renowned coach and therapist that I think would make a good pairing. And the other thing is, who's going to be working with you? Who's going to be staying with you? And, I went from the approach of, hey, great speakers are great to have on your show. Well, if your audience doesn't relate to them, if they're never coming back to the audience, you actually missed an opportunity. And you really haven't done much for the great speaker, because they're not going to sell a ton of books or tickets, So why not stay with the people you're working with and have that group? And I see Harvey's done that. I see Kelly's done that, because, birds of a feather flock together. Every first responder and vet has an invested interest in Kelly's Awesome Journey shows. And they know what to expect, but they also know the people who are going there are just like them. So not only did you learn from the speaker, but you learned from the people in the audience, and you got to network. And that's what the value becomes, is what can you really build that can build again on it, versus stop, start. And, if you do have a show that's like Jimmy Fallon or something, or you're a talk show where you got millions of viewers, that's a different situation, because that's a different revenue model, because that's based on numbers as opposed to quality information and collaboration. So just knowing where you fit, knowing where you don't fit, and sometimes where you don't fit is where you want to fit and when you're like fitting, but it's not going to happen. Wishing and hoping, it was a song at one time, won't get you to where you want to go at times. So it's, I look at it as a very dynamic process, a very creative process, a chance, just like writing a book, to express yourself in numbers, in dates, in situations and people. And the more experienced you are, the easier it is to understand the elements you have to work with and how they work together. Too many people, we're going to make a lot of money in no time at all, and you never have to worry. Yeah, well, that's about as extreme as you can get. It's probably just as bad a story as you're wasting your money, you're wasting your time, nothing good will happen here. People will appreciate your honesty. But just like I think I mentioned the other week, I was talking to some investor who was really strong on an investment. And as soon as the CEO of the company or chairman says, mark my words, in 2 years we'll be better than Google, it blew everything out of the water. Because at that point it's like, geez, you had me up until then. Now I have you didn't need to do that. You didn't even do any of that. And now you set me up to either buy into something that I don't believe could happen. And I don't believe in a person who says that to people who are willing to invest in their business, because they're going to keep saying that to everybody. And why would I want to be part of that group? And you got to ask yourself, why would they? And I think that's so important, is put yourself in their shoes. If you're going to put $500,000 or $1 million into something, what would you want to see and feel and hear in order to feel justified? Because it won't stop with them typically. It'll go to their spouse. Someone says, I'm going to invest $1 million in something. Usually they're going to say, hey, honey, I'm thinking about this. And the natural why that much? Why this? Why now? So you got to weather that storm of, let's say, criticism, especially if it's one layer removed. Even when I used to hire people and people used to say, well, I'll have to talk to my wife about that. And I was like, well, you should have brought your wife here, right? And I could have told her directly. I mean, it was kind of facetious. But the point is, or the people say, I'd love to do it, my wife won't let me. It's like, leave her out of this. Why do you need someone to blame? And it's got to be your wife that takes the hit versus, hey, I thought about it, didn't work. No one has to. Anyways, don't want to walk down that rabbit hole. But there's something to answers that make you more concerned than the question you originally had, right? Because it discloses something about the person or about the strategy that you weren't fully aware of. And now it's like, hey, now I'm a little bit less interested. So, and you never know. I always looked at no's as being a not yet, and sometimes people want to have, it's not the time, it's not the place, it's not the situation. But, you might end up with a referral. If it's not for you at this time, do you know somebody that might be interested? You don't want to keep drilling down a dry hole and expecting anything to come from it. And you don't want to be the kind of person that not only didn't you get a person to come in with you, but now you turned a person away from you because of, hey, no, let me tell you something else. Or before you go, it's like selling somebody a car. I can throw in some floor mats and we can make this happen. But, also realize no one's perfect and no strategy or business plan is perfect. So there's naturally going to be issues, and there should be, because if everything is 110%, there's no opportunity, right? If there's no room for growth or expansion or change, well, there's the magic to it if you can find that. So coming up, well, we still got a little time. Karl, what are your thoughts that I didn't have a question for yet?
We can go a couple different directions, but the one that you're just talking about, I think, is a topic of concern for me, and that's people setting unrealistic goals. As I said earlier, a strategy is to get you from where you're at to your goal. But too often you will see an entrepreneur, particularly a startup or young entrepreneur, saying that this is what my goal is going to be. As you used an example, we're going to be bigger than Google. And you hear the statement, you go, you've got all the energy of youth, you've got all the exuberance of lack of experience that has you thinking big thoughts, and that's okay, but it's not a goal, because a goal is something that's attainable. It's something that's doable, something that you can get to. And so, I typically, once I put a strategy on the table, is I stress test it. I go, okay, can I do this by myself? Which generally is a no. And I'm expecting that. But when I say no, then it reveals what am I missing? Talent, resources, money, connections, something. I go, okay, now if I add that to the recipe for my success, will that guarantee me I'll get to my goal? And I keep doing this iterative additions until I go, now it looks reasonable, it looks rational that I can go from where I'm at to this goal. It's not some undefined bigger than Google's. Is actually the worst thing about it is you go, what does that mean? Is that $1 bigger? Is it twice as big as Google? You haven't set any metrics that we can measure other than wherever Google's going to be at in the future. So then I go back and I go, let's go through a scenario. Let's walk through how this might happen. And if it all comes together and everything holds tight, then everything's good. This we may then take this, stick it into a business plan, provide all the details, and go forward. But quite often during scenario testing, something goes wrong. You go, oh, I didn't think of that, or I don't have that, or what if the Fed lowers the interest rate next week or increases the interest rate next week or any number of other things? And we were joking earlier because we're using LinkedIn as our primary platform. And LinkedIn, as much as we cherish its use, will make changes, which they're trying to improve their platform to achieve their goals. And sometimes in doing that, they didn't quite tell us everything they were going to do, and we have to figure it out later. But part of this is that if I had made a strategy that assumed that LinkedIn would be, the same day in, day out for the next 4 years, that would be a really bad assumption to make because we know inherently they're going to continue to work to make their platform better, which means the interface with different other pieces of software, the way they go about doing stuff, that's all a changing, moving target. And yet, this is the platform that we've chosen because we think it's better than the other platforms. So, your scenario testing has to accommodate change, it has to accommodate setbacks, it has to accommodate a partner who gets ill or has to take a time off or gets a better job and leaves the team. And so after you stress test your strategy enough you'll start getting a perspective of these things are pretty solid, more likely to happen than not. These things are a little iffy, and maybe we should put in some fallbacks, or we should add another member to the team in case there's an issue somewhere along the path. And your goal is to make this a high probability scenario that will follow your path and get you to your goal. Without that, you basically said, oh, let's give this a try. That didn't work. Let's give this a try. And that didn't work. And after a while, you go, I ran out of resources. This didn't work. And you get to go somewhere else and start over again. So I think that strategy is one of these early things that you need to spend more time with. As I say in software, you should spend 80% of your time in design, 20% in coding. I think altogether we should spend a lot more time in the design of our business, creating the strategy, getting it ready to go before we start asking people to commit resources or committing more of our own resources to making it happen. Because unless you enjoy failure, you're going to get a lot of it if you don't have a good strategy.
Well, those are good points because what it begs for is contingency. If an investor says, well, I might be able to do something next year, can you last that long? What happens if you don't get the money? And I found in my career, almost everything you're new to, or even a lot of things you're old to, take longer and cost more than you ever anticipate because it's not a straight line. But you going to the store and picking up milk, that's a pretty easy assumption. But if you got to depend on a developer who then depends on somebody else, and maybe they're doing something offshore, something changes, that's going to change your timeline. It's going to change your performance. And you never want to go to the market with a tin cup out there, being dependent on some generous person to save you. It should be, well, if it's not right, I'll take it back and I'll redo it and I'll come back for next year's premiere, see how it goes. But it also allows you to really check all your bases and say, do we need that fancy office? I mean, what is primary? What's essential? What's the follow-on that we could bring? That if this happens, yeah, we'll go out and lease offices. In the meantime, I got an uncle that's got some empty space in the back of his store. He'll let us use it. And if you don't care about your money, you're definitely not going to care about other people's money. And people who come visit you, and a lot of times they'll look at your facilities. There's some higher marks you might get for, hey, 3 people sharing an office in the beginning to save money, people buying a reconditioned product instead of new, or old product that still works, because every penny goes towards or against your future. And if you invest wisely in things that are pragmatic, an investor would say they're careful, they're thoughtful, and no one really cares about what they look like today. It's what they're going to be doing tomorrow with what they have today in order to grow into it. And investors in time will tell you, okay, now it's time, enough of this backroom stuff. It's time to get a real strong brand appearance, but also have contingencies to say, if I sign a lease, can I get out of it in 90 days if it's not working out? And that's how you present to the landlord. I got limited funds. I'd like to come in with you, but there's some issues, and some of those issues could be mitigated if I'm not committed to long-term situations, or maybe even pay a little bit of a premium. Say I'll pay more rent if I can go month to month than if I'm stuck for 3 years, because it's not the mistakes you make, it's how bad the mistakes you make affect you. Trial and error is going to give you a lot of hits and misses. The ones that stick are the ones you'll build on. The ones that miss will be the ones you exclude or review maybe at a later date. But also understand and that's another thing with a strategy, is something to measure against. Here's what I was thinking at the time, based on what I knew at the time. 90 days later, here's what I found reality to be. Some of it rewarded me, some of it educated me, and now I'm going to make that adjustment. Like Karl says, if you don't get off track, you're always on track. Once you get off track, do you get back? And maybe getting back isn't where you want to go, but again, that's something you intend to say, this road I was taking was never going to get me there. That's an easy way to lose that road and find another one. And some people are just don't have patience. They expect the world to turn when they want it to, as opposed to say, well, it takes time for people to see my commercial before they act on it. And sometimes you got to realize you're just not good enough. And that's why people aren't rushing to your door. It says you're a work in progress, and it's going to take, again, longer, cost you more. But I think the other thing is not when you made the presentation or built the strategy, is how do you come around and explain the results? Because most people will just go right to the numbers, and that's not a benefit to them or you. But if you get your quarterly report, they're going to look at the last line that says plus or minus typically, maybe look at some other numbers that are important to them, but it's the context. Our product wasn't delivered till the end of the quarter, so it couldn't sell. Well, okay, that's just something that has to do with delivery, not with your strategy and what's important to your strategy. And again, there's a balance between how much you communicate, how much you involve. If all your investors are coming to your business every day of the week, asking little questions and keeping your people occupied with things that are not important to the business strategy or to you, that's a challenge. Keeping people in the dark is not a benefit, because when time comes for them to make another decision, they're going to realize how they were treated, how they were informed. And typically non-disclosure or lack of disclosure creates more cynicism or skepticism than even results. Again, based on how you can communicate, and also getting their opinion. You know, there's still somebody to put money in. It may be not something you take at face value, but at least you can take a measurement. Hey, this person's not going to be hanging around here long, or this person's going to start creating issues. You know, how do we get them comfortable? And that's where sometimes you got to give and take. You know, I know people have pet projects or they love something, and is a way we can make this our logo, which is probably not important, but you know, it's again a lot of, anytime you're dealing with people, you're dealing with dynamic situations that will surprise you. And I guess not letting something go too long that is too hard to come back to and deal with. And sometimes you got to understand some things don't work. Sometimes your strategy is flawed from the beginning and could never work. You didn't see it. And you just got to accept that for what it is. What happens next doesn't matter, because it's what's happening now or what has happened that put you in this position. Wow, we're already at an hour, and I got caught up in something I started thinking about too much and talking about even more. So, Karl, last words that you can share with this illustrious audience?
Yeah, going back to our basics here is that strategy is not an option. It's almost a mandate that you engage in development of a strategy in order to be successful. And it's something that most businesses skip over or don't allocate enough resources to because they're in a hurry to go to market, and not planning, not preparing, not strategizing may get you to market quicker, but it also may find the gaps in your thinking ever so much quicker, and the penalties may be ever so much greater. So give appropriate amount of time to strategy. Make sure that it matches with everyone on your team, everyone in your community, and that you're creating a collective of people who can all work together for mutual benefit. Somewhere along the win-win-win-win-win thing, you should have enough, I will call it momentum, to carry you forward towards your goal.
Yeah, that's a great point to end on, except that we need to recognize Dennis, who created his last comment. I made it in Cape Cod. Happy to be here and to hear you agree, give and take, but give more world, helping others. That's a quality comment. And we're here after the show. If you have anything, you can reach out to me or Karl through our profile. Have a call if you're interested and it's relevant. And continue to take this advice, to heart, and have, it could make a difference between your next presentation, how you view strategy. So we're both happy to be here today to support you in these efforts, and had a great show. So thank you, Karl. Thank you, audience. Come back tomorrow with Beverly and Jason. Then we've got Karl on Wednesday and Thursday with Kelly. So great week ahead. Wish everybody the best, and we'll talk